Hello, welcome. This is the Newsy Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we're going to talk about why I believe the blue wave is a myth. We're going to cover a lot of ground in this video or podcast, depending on how you're watching or listening to this. So try and keep up. I'll try to keep the reading to a minimum because I know a lot of people on the podcast, it gets a little confusing. But let's go into these stories. I have an array of stories I'm basing this off of. So let's go into it right now. And the first story we're going to look at is from NBC News, and it's actually a poll that's some study that they've been doing on registrations, and it's titled Uncertainty Over a Blue Wave. NBC News finds Democratic and GOP voter registrations at same levels as past elections. Now, what they talk about in this story, and we'll read a little bit of it, doesn't really go into it at first. It's kind of complicated, but I'll read the first couple paragraphs. Less than a month from Election Day, both parties have focused on registering as many voters as possible and competing to see which holds the advantage in turning out their base. The turnout battle is the most important fight in winning control of Congress. Since the November 2016 presidential election, over 25 million people have registered to vote for the first time or have used registration form to update their address, name, or party affiliation. All right, let's continue. Now, pretty much what this story is about, it's about voter registration, and what they're arguing is that voter registration is at the same levels as it was any other midterm cycle. Now, if there really was a blue wave, if they really had the energy on the Democratic side, registration numbers would probably show it. This story talks about voter registration in key states, and they actually look at registration numbers for the past few elections. And that lets you know right there, that the energy is just not really there. Let's move on to the next story. The next story is actually out of the Washington Post, in its opinion. And the title is, Will the Blue Wave Collapse Before It Reaches Shore? Now, this is in the Washington Post, mind you. Anyway, let's go into this story. One can only assume that in the Kavanaugh home, there's a horseshoe over every door, rabbit foots in every pocket, and a lawn entirely planted with four-leaf clovers. There were half a dozen times during the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court nomination battle when most experts were certain he'd have to be withdrawn. Republicans already faced a likely Democratic wave in the midterms, and standing by Kavanaugh would all but concede not only the House but also possibly the Senate. Yet somehow he was confirmed, and his party's luck is even more astounding. Far from turning the blue wave into an indigo tsunami, the Kavanaugh fight seems to have produced a red undertow. As of writing, that backwash looks strong enough to check Democratic advances in the Senate, or maybe even gain a couple of seats. If Republicans are very lucky, they might even retain control of the House. You read that. That's the Washington Post. That's a Washington Post opinion. Let's move on. If the blue wave collapses before it hits shore, Democrats may need to ask whether Me Too and other forms of identity politics are really the wave of the Democrat future. This opinion actually nails it. It's actually a really good opinion. If you have time, definitely go on and read it. But we have to move on. A small critique. The writer equates the backlash to Kavanaugh fight to luck, when actually the pushback was primarily about due process. Democrats' coalition building strategy since the early thousands was to build a voter base based on minorities and women. The growing minority populations would ensure a Democrat majority for years to come. This strategy is what was thought to have fueled the rise of Obama. This strategy of focusing on minorities and women proved short-sighted for a few key reasons. First, minority groups tend to cluster in major cities, and in order to win the heart of the country, you need more than city dwellers. The second flaw in this plan is women and minorities are not a monolith. Excluding blacks, Hispanics, and other migrant populations will vote for Republicans. Also, in contrast to white voters, minorities don't vote. They didn't show up for Obama. They did show up for Obama, but that enthusiasm has eluded most Democratic candidates. And when I say they don't vote, I mean they don't vote in midterms typically. The third flaw in this is whites still make up a large portion of the voting population, and if they were to become a monolith of sorts for the Republican Party, the Republicans would be unstoppable. Overall, the focus on identity politics has proven to be very toxic for Democrats. So even minorities, even though it's a small subset, are turning over, or voting for Republicans mainly because of this. Now let's move on to the next story. The next story, let's go into it. Despite rampant voter enthusiasm, the reality is many don't plan to vote in November. And I think this is a Houston Chronicle story. And in it, they talk about how people just basically don't vote. Let's go into it. Clarksville, Tennessee, interest in the midterm election is at a fever pitch in much of the country, with both Democrats and Republicans far more passionate than they've been in more than a decade. Could this be the year that Tennessee's Montgomery County shows up to vote? Located northwest of Nashville along the Kentucky border, this county often has one of the lowest voting ratings in the state. Now, in it, they focus on this county in Clarksville, Tennessee, and they talk about how people just aren't that jazzed to vote, and the reasons for not voting may vary by location, but the features similar strains of disillusionment and skepticism. Tennessee has harsher voting restrictions in place than states with the higher turnout. So they try to blame it on voting laws like providing an ID, but I think what it mainly has to do with the fact is that there are just some groups that just don't like to vote, and it doesn't matter how enraged they get about who's in office, they're just not going to go vote. The question is, who will this or won't this? Crap, what am I saying? The question is, will this or won't this hold true for the midterm elections? That's the question we have to ask. I think there will be record turnout in 2018, but I think the jury is still out as to whom that will benefit. Let's move on to the next story. The next story is from CNBC, and the title is Don't Expect a Big Democratic Wave This Fall, a new CNBC poll says. Now let's go into this story a little bit. With economic optimism soaring in the country, will Democrats be able to sweep to power in either House or Congress, or will buoyant sentiment help Republicans keep their congressional majorities? The latest CNBC All-American Economic Survey offers mixed signals but leans against a wave for Democrats. And basically what this story is, they polled 800 people, and, it used to be for a long time that a really good economy helped the party that was in power. And I don't know when we got away from this being a thing, but I do think that this weighs against the Democrat blue wave narrative. And this is actually out of CNBC. So when you weigh a blue wave against this, I mean, it's hard to see a blue wave when we got polling that says that people are generally happy with the economy. Let's move on to the next story. What will be the biggest drag on Democrats going into the midterms? There is no doubt the Democrats' handling of the Kavanaugh hearing, hurt them and probably turned the tide for them in their blue wave. The booming economy is sure to play a role in this election. The Democrats' overzealous activism has had the largest impact, in my opinion. People are just sick and tired of every time they turn on the TV, they see violence, and it's mainly towards Republicans. And let's look at some of these stories from the past year that, people aren't weighing in as far as this counterbalancing the blue wave. Now, this story is out of the National Review, and it is titled 8 Violent Attacks on Republicans Just This Year. The first one, switchblade stabbing attempt. California Congressman candidate Rudy Peters, who is challenging Democratic Rep. Eric Swalwell, narrowly escaped a stabbing attempt in September. Peters' attackers, Farzad Fazel, shouted disparaging remarks about Republicans before attempting to stab the GOP candidate with a switchblade, police said. Male Democratic operative allegedly assaults female Trump staffer. An operative with Democratic political group American Bridge was arrested in March for assaulting a female staffer in President Donald Trump's administration. The liberal operative allegedly shoved the woman, a press secretary for Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke, to the floor as he chased after Zinke. Now, this same male operative assaulted another female Republican. Same male Democratic operative allegedly assaults female GOP campaign manager. That same American Bridge operative, Wilfred Stark, was arrested Tuesday for allegedly chasing and assaulting Nevada gubernatorial nominee Adam Laxalt's campaign manager. Stark was charged with battery for the attack, with which the woman was bruised as well as terrified and traumatized. You know, the hatred from the left, especially for Republican women, is just, it's pretty chilling. In the next story, we're not going to talk about all these. We're only going to talk about a few of them because I don't want to take up too much of your time. The next one is Minnesota State Rep candidate says she was chased by property destroying anarchists. Minnesota State Rep Sarah Anderson said she was attacked on Sunday after calling out a man who was kicking over campaign yard signs. I said, "You can't do this." And he said, "Yes, I can, and I am an anarchist. I can do whatever I want." And I said, "No, you can't. That's not your property," Anderson said, adding that the man chased her into the street and told her to kill herself. So, I mean, these far left activists, they just have just a bloodlust, especially towards Republican women. It is quite disgusting. The next one is Minnesota State GOP candidate says he was assaulted and concussed by politically motivated assailant. Another Minnesota Republican state rep, Shane Mecklin, said he received a concussion on October 12th when he was assaulted by a man he believed was politically motivated. "While I never met my assailant, the words he yelled at me before the attack led me to believe his actions were politically motivated," Mecklin said in a statement Sunday, adding that the police are investigating. Wow. There's a raw hatred on the left in general, but there's a special hatred of women on the right by liberal activist men. They seek out our women, our women, and they for vitriol, and the things that they say to them and the things that they do to them it's pretty disgusting. If there's really a war on women, it's actually liberal men attacking conservative women. Democrat elected officials have done everything but call for outright violence against Republicans. This isn't a winning tactic for any political movement. This will also blunt Democrat momentum going into November. Americans want jobs, not mobs. Okay, what exactly do we have to look forward to if Democrats do win the House? This takes us into our next story. 7 things Democrats will do if they win back the House. Now let's look at these stories. Let's go into it. And this is actually out of the Washington Examiner. Democrats are projected to win back the House in November midterm elections, and they are already planning a muscular agenda and setting their own policy priorities for this first time since 2010, and also investigating Trump. Controlling the House doesn't mean Democrats can pass any bill they want into law. A split Senate will continue to act as a hurdle, and President Trump still has the power to veto bills he doesn't like. But Democrats would still be able to set the agenda in the House. Here are 7 things they are likely to try. The first thing is investigate. Democrats have complained from the start of the Trump administration needs to be held more accountable, but without the majority's power to subpoena Trump officials, Democrats have been unable to force a reckoning with the administration. So they plan on to investigate and to basically gum up the works for this administration. The next thing they want to do is gun control. Since Trump took office, there have been 2 major mass shootings carried out in the U.S., which has energized Democrats to call for stricter gun regulations. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, who wants to be House Speaker again, told Politico that one of the first bills to hit the floor under the Democratic control would seek to make it more difficult for people to purchase guns. So they're after gun control. The next thing they want to go after is Trump's tax returns. Trump never released his tax returns when he was campaigning, and Democrats can be expected to use a law that will let them look over his tax filings even if Trump resists. The law lets the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee to look over anyone's tax returns. As a result, obtaining and analyzing Trump's returns could be one of the first things Democrats do with House majority. So they want to rifle through his financial statements so they can try to find things to go after him about. The next one is internet regulations. We talked about this in the last story. Trump has kept true to his promise to decrease the amount of regulations stifling industry workers, which he made during his campaign. But the push for regulations will likely make a comeback under Democrats, particularly in the area of the internet. Ever since the U.S. intelligence community said Russians were able to influence the U.S. presidential elections through social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, Democrats have been looking for ways to impose and tighten regulations for these sites. Ideas for regulations run the gamut from requiring sites to label bot accounts to making platforms legally liable for claims like defamation, invasion of privacy, a leaked Democrat document revealed. The next one is taxes. They want to take back our crumbs. They call the tax overhaul crumbs for the American people, and they want to take those crumbs back, folks. Democrats are using Republicans' $1.5 trillion tax cut as a campaign strategy, claiming the cuts only benefit corporations in the top 1%. A House victory for Democrats in November's midterm elections would let them start pushing for a complete tax overhaul, including an increase in corporate tax rate. The next thing they want to do is drug prices. Democrats introduced a bill over the summer that would allow for Medicare to negotiate its prices directly with pharmaceutical companies, a sign of things to come if Democrats control the House. The next thing is immigration and border security. Trump has warned that if Democrats take over, they'll look to ease federal immigration laws, and Democrats have admitted they would look to make changes there. And that's pretty much it. I mean, straight up lawlessness. I mean, Democrats have done nothing to earn the majority of American people's votes. My prediction is that the Democrats won't win the House. Republicans will make small gains in the Senate and lose seats in the House, but still maintain a tiny majority. I understand this goes against mainstream polling, but nothing I've seen in the political landscape support the notion of a blue wave. Yes, they might have polls out the wazoo, they might have voter enthusiasm, but as you see in the stories I've laid out, there are counter narratives to a lot of those polls, and also the reality doesn't reflect a blue wave. Democrats will win big in urban areas and have mixed or negative results in Republican strongholds. Now, there is one thing that I haven't talked about in all these stories, and that is the fact that that's the elephant in the room. And of course, the big elephant in the room is the Honduran caravan story. Whether or not that's on anybody's radar, this has the potential to be huge, a huge determining factor in which way voters cast their ballots. We can't forget why Trump was elected. I don't know what the Democrats think of this from a midterm election perspective, like strategy, but I will be surprised to see polling in favor of these migrants coming into this country the way they're trying to do it. What makes this caravan story so powerful is it illustrates better than anything we've seen so far how broken our immigration laws are. Democrats in moderate House districts would be forced to go on the record about this. This could be what finally does end the blue wave narrative. If the media thinks the picture of roads filled with people marching north toward America is a win for Democrats, they are mistaken. They think Americans want this. A vast majority of Americans are frightened by this caravan. They're vowing to be here by Election Day, and that will spell doom for the Democratic Party. We still don't know a lot of key details about this caravan so basically I won't go into detail about different aspects of it because I don't know who's funding it. I don't know who's organizing it, but as they move closer, these things will be exposed. My take is this. This is anybody's race to win at this point. This is why we need to get out and vote. Let me know what you think about this, because in my opinion, this doesn't bode well for Democrats the longer this takes to play out. But in the short term, there will be ebbs and flows and there will be new polls. But as of right now, we're not, the election's not that far away. I don't think it looks good for Democrats. I think they had a little bit of momentum going into the summer, but I think a lot of things that they've tried have blown up in their face and it's hurt them. I think this race was I think it was always destined for them to lose it because of the economy. And there was only so long they could keep up this Russia collusion story. And there was only so long all these other stories that they tried to pile on to Trump could be played out and the truth would be exposed. Anyway, follow us on BitChute and give me a like and share this if you want to. And all of the sources that I provided, I know I used a lot of different news articles, and I know that might make this a little more boring if you're listening to this on a podcast. But all the sources are below, and you can read all these great articles that I've been collecting about why this blue wave is not a thing. Anyway, till next time, peace.